Hey there, my fellow hot multi-sport endurance athletes. So hot, it's the time we're talking about heat in the race season, training and racing season for that matter. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about finding speed, even given the heat. We have goals, we have perspectives that we want to sort of put into place. We've been building for efforts over years, or just even the context of this year. We have aspirations, and then this heat thing shows up. The weather shows up, the 10-day, the 7-day, the 5-day, the 3-day report, the 24-hour report, and the icons just keep getting worse and like redder and turning from like red dots to like little flames to big flames. Quite frankly, you're worried about Smokey the Bear showing up and telling you that just even putting out any effort on the day will result in some sort of terrible, devastating forest fire. Not to make fun of forest fires, but you're getting the general idea. And it's really important to pay attention to the heat. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to give you some opportunities here to understand where you can find speed. But let me start with a story. So the year is 2016, 17. I can't remember which year it is, but it's the year they decided to postpone the Boston Marathon or give you the option to bail out of the Boston Marathon simply because of the impending heat. The weather in New England in April is very variable. It can be just awful cold and wet, and it can also be super, super hot. And the Boston Marathon really sort of epitomizes that. It's one of the many aspects that makes it a very unique standalone event, sort of in the general flow of marathon masters, not to mention the point-to-point nature of the event. And this is a hot year. And thankfully, the opportunity to defer came up because I was not prepared for this race. I think it was even earlier than 2016. And I was like, this is not going to be good. I'm not really in shape to run a marathon or run it as well as I want. And it's going to be so hot, I'm not going to do it. So I had an opportunity to stand on the sidelines with my family, roughly about mile 15, just after halfway, just past the Wellesley point in the marathon, where folks get lots of support from the Wellesley co-eds. It was fascinating to me to see how the runners were coming through. And of course, we have the elites, and they're operating at another level. First, the wheelchair athletes, the disabled athletes, then the women, and then we have the men and all the sort of professionals coming through. And then you start having the elite age group athletes come through. And this is where things really became interesting, because folks were looking at mile 15 of this arduous marathon in and of itself on a regular day as though they were at the finish line. From a heat perspective, they were super red in the face. Their bodies were trying to compensate for all this external stress on their systems. But these were the athletes who were unwilling to be flexible, right? They were like, hey, I wanted to run a 2:30 or I want to run a 2:40 or whatever their target was. I understand that, Mother Nature has shown up and said it's going to be super hot today, but I don't care. I'm going to still run my race. And they're essentially rolling the dice and saying, I'm going to impose my will on this day. And the longer the event, the less likely you can get away with it. So for those folks, I would have said, probably to get you to here, mile 13, 15, probably about right for ignoring the conditions. But beyond that, you're really rolling the dice, and things could go horribly wrong if you're not careful in terms of taking care of your body. And also, your race performance could be in jeopardy. Nothing worse than having to slow down at the end of a hard race simply because you can't go on and you've accumulated too much heat. So with that cautionary tale in mind and that memory burned in my brain of these athletes, men and women alike, who were just suffering so badly from the heat, how do we find speed on race day? This is an excellent question because, again, people do still want to be fast, and it's still a competition, right? And depending on what your goals are, you may want to find some speed out there that's going to allow you to be successful in the context of your age group or just overall for whatever your goals may be. And everyone has a different set of goals, so it's important to kind of understand that and keep it in mind so you're not feeling the pressure to perform just for the sake of performing, but that we're making decisions based off of these options for you that support your broader goals, okay? So the first and foremost, the best place to find speed is early, right? The temperature increases across the course of the day. Depending where you are in terms of latitude on the globe, you may have different experiences with temperature and heat, and similarly for timing of the year, where the temperature may improve or unimprove across the course of the day. So right now, as we're looking at races here in the sort of June, July, August timeframe, the temperature is going up through the early morning, and it'll get pretty hot by like 11, but really the temperature continues to rise almost through 4, 5, even 6 o'clock, even though the sun is kind of setting because we have that accumulated heat through the intensity and the proximity of the sun to the earth relative to the winter months. And as a result, it can get really challenging. So you want to know what that heat window looks like, and you want to be able to do the math on it so you can make sure where you are and the effort you're doing makes sense. But most importantly, from this case, we want to say, how much free time, how much speed time do I have? So in the context of an Ironman, if you're racing, race starts at 6:30 on the swim and you're out and you're riding your bike by 8 a.m., you may have from 8 until 11 a.m. to work hard before the heat really sets in and things become challenging. You want to know that time because those early miles matter. I've used this myself strategically, racing hot races like Cozumel or Cabo or even Ironman Hawaii, pushing harder earlier in the day and then backing things off later as the heat kind of rises and your temperature and your heart rate starts to go up as well. Being able to dial the effort back then as opposed to staying steady becomes a competitive advantage as you conserve heartbeats for critical and strategic parts of the day later on. So early effort is your best effort, so maximizing that stuff. So this is why on hotter days you want to have a good swim so you're not wasting 10 or 15 minutes in the water of an Ironman. Similarly, for a running event, one of the things you want to do, start early, and you want to put in that time and fuel yourself and take care of yourself, but put that time in early before the heat of the day does strike, and you do need to slow down just to be smart, okay? The second space where we can find free speed on race day is pretty straightforward. Didn't think you really needed to be clued in on this one, but it's important to note, which is the downhills, right? So anytime you're going downhill, you can do less work for the same or even better speed. This is an opportunity for you to recover, but also to make up time on your very smart, patient climbing hill or riding into a headwind or riding with a dead tailwind self. For being respectful of the conditions, it does mean that we're probably sacrificing some time gains, and the downhills are an opportunity to get it back, but still within context. We want that heart rate to come down. We need our heart rate to come down. So while we can go faster on some of these downhills, we don't want to work so hard that it keeps our heart rate up, similar to what it's been at on the flats or perhaps even on this most recent climb. Our body needs to get that heart rate back down again, hopefully in an opportunity to anchor it at a new lower number and then slowly be able to increase it up. If we don't give our body the space to recover, but continue to stay at that steady load, if you stay at that steady number all day, over time, as you dehydrate, become fatigued, less efficient, that heart rate number is going to drift up. And at some point, it gets to a place where no matter what you do, you really can't bring that heart rate down. That's a tough spot to be. So when we think about taking things down, we want to think about downhills and maximizing it, whether you're on your own 2 feet or you're on 2 wheels. Taking advantage of these downhills is really important. In addition, generally speaking, especially if you're on the bike and you're going faster, you have an opportunity to get cool again, which can also help reduce that core body temperature, which becomes important. So even later in the day, if it's early, fine, but even if it's later in the day, do be prepared to maximize those downhills because they will become your friend. It's also an opportunity to be engaged or perhaps strategically using intensity on a day when otherwise there's very few of those opportunities simply due to the conditions. And then the third element is a place where you can kind of push your effort is on crosswinds. Okay. And this is a little kind of roll your dicey side of information, but I do think it's relevant. If it's a straight headwind, pushing into a headwind is really not worth it. Generally speaking, I'd much rather have you drop behind someone, whether you're on the bike or the run, let them do the work of pushing through the wind. You conserve your heartbeats, conserve your energy, be smart for when the time does matter. But when we think about the difference between a straight headwind and a straight tailwind, in some ways, especially on a hot day, a straight tailwind is even worse. Everything gets quiet. You don't have the sensation of wind because the wind is traveling with you. But at the same time, you're also very hot because you don't have that wind actually blowing on you. It's going with you. As a net result, you're not getting any of that cooling effect. And that can be really challenging as well. So that's why I believe some of that cross tail wind is great because you're still getting some wind on your body to cool you down, but it's not so strong or so directly in front of you that it is going to be able to limit your performance. Now, other spaces in there where you can find some speed is really just optimizing other parts of your day. So outside of the athletic stuff that I've talked about already, just the logistics also matter on these hot weather days. So managing your transitions to be faster, less moving parts, managing your aid stations to make sure you're getting the fluids and food and ice and the strategic things you need to stay cool as long as you can. On the course, you get to that next aid station and repeat the process. That's also another easy way to do it. Another element of managing finding early speed is making sure the nutrition is on point. Good nutrition early in your day is what's going to set you up for later in the day. And you're going to need that nutrition in your system when you get there. But it's really hard to be eating as our body as the core temperature, essentially rises and effort continues to vary across the course of the day and the course that you've chosen. So as a result, being on top of your nutrition, making sure you're getting in food early, but perhaps even opting for a little bit less food and a little more fluid as you're getting into some of these hotter situations. Digesting food becomes really hard because your body's trying to direct the blood flow to the surface of the skin to kind of cool things off. It doesn't want to also simultaneously supply a lot of blood to your quadriceps that refuse to stop moving, and your glutes, which, yes, even though you feel like you have none, are there and they're working. That can become a really tough push-pull situation. And ideally, you're as optimized as possible there as you're going forward. So when you think about racing and you think about speed, don't feel like in the heat you've got to get rid of everything. Understand that there are elements you can affect. I list those as being early on the day and being aggressive early. Number two, really maximizing the downhills, not only for recovery, but some of that free speed and being super smart and fast. And then three, opting for or hoping for some kind of crosswinds or crosstail where you get the benefit of the wind, but also some of the cooling effect without the cost of having to deal with a straight headwind, which is just too hard, or a tailwind, which leaves you hot on the day. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope this episode here on finding speed in the heat was helpful. If so, definitely tell someone else about it. Smash the like button. Great to have you here. I look forward to hearing your stories of dealing with the heat. We'll be back soon with another episode. Take it easy, everybody.